I'm really happy to welcome Lisa Edelstein to today's podcast, Right for the Role, the podcast. And the reason I'm happy is because your life really exemplifies the theme of the podcast, which is reinvention, growth, change, intentionality, all of those things. As I got to know you through the research that we did, it's just extraordinary how in charge of yourself you are. And I really admire that. And normally I start at the beginning, but I'd like to start at this gigantic transition that's happening. There was this pandemic. We all remember it. And one of the things that you did during the pandemic was move your parents out here to Southern California from New Jersey. Were they still in the family home in New Jersey?
They were actually in the Berkshires and part-time in Texas where my sister has lived for many, many years.
Uh-huh.
But
Well,
they were physically in the Berkshires when we started this process.
and one of the besides reconnecting on a regular basis, with them and sharing this experience of the pandemic with them, they brought along a trove of images. And you looked at those images. They were the diaspora of your family's life, and you translated them into paintings. Tell me about that process and how that spoke to you and what was going on in your heart when you found those images.
Well, it is like revisiting your whole life when you inherit so many images. And there was a combination between just sort of being in the receipt of all of these images, and also the kind of way we were spending time during the pandemic. I was doing the Kaminsky method and Lone Star at the same time during the pandemic. So I was actually working, but there was nothing else happening. Everything else was silence. And that kind of sense of not needing to be anywhere, that sense of comfort at your downtime was a really beautiful experience for me. And I decided to use my time by making myself a coloring book from these images that I had gotten. And when I was looking through them, at first, I was thinking about the kind of dark side of suburban childhoods, you know, the cigarette smoking in the backyard, giving your kid a side eye glare, lots of tab, that's a soft drink, um, just sort of the affectations of suburbia, et cetera, et cetera. And through that, I started to see my own family and the amount of yarmulkes that were in my childhood, the faces of my grandparents and my great grandparents and my aunts and uncles, these beautiful immigrant faces, and all of that sort of became a part of what I wanted to explore with my paintings.
And you, as a child, you were an avid drawer. Magic markers, is that what you
Yeah,
used?
I
That's a
loved magic markers as a kid. Yeah,
that's a
and
medium
and
I don't know.
well, the cheap magic markers you get as a kid is one thing, but there are these beautiful markers now that exist in the world. There's a few different kinds that I know about, and they are like you can blend them just a little bit. The colors are extraordinary. They really stay, and they have a paint tip end or one of those sort of block ends. But I like the paint tip end. And so, yeah, so I started using what I was most familiar with, which was these magic markers. And then the work started getting larger and more ornate and more complex and larger and larger. And so I started pouring the ink out of the refills and using a paintbrush. And then finally, I started just learning how to paint because it was becoming absurd. I just had to learn how to mix colors. I needed to learn how to use watercolor and how to mix colors. And
Right.
once I did that, I was sort of like set free.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a few of your paintings, and they are to me, I felt like that I was looking at a theater piece on
Yeah.
canvas. There's something wonderfully bigger and more vivid than my life. Maybe my life is a little dull, but the diaspora that you are depicting has real depth of color and it as a result, it has a real emotionality.
Thank you so much. I feel like because I've worked so long as an actress and a storyteller, a writer, director, it's definitely a part of how I like to paint, which is very narrative. And yeah, it is theatrical. I love that. And those are the images I'm looking for. A lot of
Yeah,
times people will be like, hey, can you paint my family? And they'll send me a picture of like them and their favorite aunt or whatever, arm in arm. And it's a completely boring picture. It's like blow the
right.
picture up. It won't make it better to have it as a painting. It's just going to be two people you love. So finding the images that actually have sort of an honesty about them or a secret about them or a question about them, it's very exciting for me. But it's hard to
Yeah,
find those.
and your rise as a painter has been so fast. I mean,
Mhm.
nothing happens that fast. You know, you and your husband are about to have a show at the Skirball Center. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't normally, help advertise people's events and projects, but I can't wait to see
Thanks,
the
John.
stuff and in more detail, I'm very interested in seeing your husband's work as well. Um, but let's go back to the beginning now,
Okay.
if it's okay. Um,
Uh-huh.
I think of drawing and painting as kind of solitary activities, and the film and television storytelling world that you landed in is a very communal, interactive world. Were you a girl who spent a lot of time alone with your magic markers?
I was. Yeah, I was. And I also enjoyed, I was a dancer, and which is also sort of an inward experience, even when you're dancing with other people. Yeah, I think I always used coloring and drawing as a coping mechanism, as a personal retreat. And I liked making things. It was fun for me. So what was interesting about it for me in retrospect is that I never really thought of it as something to present to other people. Uh, because it was about struggle. It was about if I'm struggling somewhere else, this is what I do to self-soothe, or this is a practice that I have that I can enjoy on my own and calm my brain. Um, but when I met my husband, he's an extraordinary artist and very accomplished, and really an art historian. He's so well educated in all these things. I've learned so much from him. I started to he gave me a beautiful painting on our second date and asked me for a drawing in return. And so it immediately became a part of kind of our love language. And it became, we have so many artist friends and all their work is on the walls. And he would put a couple of things that I made on the walls. And it sort of became part of the way we breathed and moved through space. And so when I really started a very serious practice where I was painting or drawing, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, then there was a place for it to go. It wasn't just something that was going to fold up and go away. And once I knew that there was somewhere for it to go, I suddenly had permission to really dive deeply into it.
Yeah, but it started out that you were doing it for the doing, um,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's such a freeing thing. I This past year, I wrote and directed a short film for the first time. I've been participating in storytelling for 40 something years, but
Yeah.
I had never taken the lead in that way, and I honestly don't care if anybody ever sees it. I mean, it'd be wonderful if they did, but
Yeah.
that wasn't the point. The point was doing it for the doing, and that's so freeing
And
and
you
love.
you learn so much too. I wrote and directed a short film right after I finished Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce, and it was I learned so much in the doing of it, and I loved doing it. You learn about you learn about the whole process in a more holistic way. I think it would be great for everybody in our business to have that experience.
I think you're right. And
Yeah.
nowadays you can make you know, you can make it on your phone. So, uh,
Yeah.
so that there's that. So, I ask pretty much everybody who's a guest on the podcast this question, which is, where did you get the nerve to think you could have a creative life?
We've been doing this our whole lives. You mean as an actor as well?
Yeah, I mean,
This
as a
is our
you know,
life. It's a good question. I think that most people are not blessed with an idea of what they want to do or be in the world. And even though what we do is so theoretically impossible, it's a gift to want it.
yeah,
It's a gift to have a real honest drive for something because that is not what most people have. Most people are trying to find a job that they don't want to die doing. You know
yeah.
what I mean? That somehow they're going to get pleasure out of. And to have an idea that there is something that you love out there that you could potentially make a living doing is a blessing.
Absolutely. You know, I wrote this memoir during the pandemic, while you were painting. I wrote this memoir with, you know, with the help of my friend Trudy Roth, and it's called Right for the Role, and obviously it's a reference to actors wanting to get hired. But more than that, it's about finding the role and roles in my life that I was right for, that who I am became assets. And that is similar to what your journey. You found all these things that who you are became assets and instead of deficits. And I think that's great. Self discovery
Well,
is an important part of
that's all we have, right? That's
yeah,
all we have is who we are. And
right,
that especially as performers, any kind of any kind of artistic expression, who you are is completely unique and wildly valuable and
yeah,
to be explored and owned and expressed and you're the only one that has it.
yeah,
So learning that sometimes, I mean, as you know, sometimes you can have an amazing audition for a role where it felt so great and there was something that really happened in the room and not get that part. And that's not because you aren't valuable or amazing or brilliant or any of those incredible things, but it's because you weren't actually the right human being to embody that part for the people who are telling the story, and you'll get another one down the road just by representing
absolutely.
yourself in a really powerful way.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the wonderful things that I found out about you, which really surprised me in one way and then not at all in another way, at 16, you were a cheerleader for Donald Trump's USFL football team, and you objected to the way the women who were your cohorts were being sexualized and depicted, and you organized a protest. I love that story. That just knocked me out. You remember doing that, and were you
Of
passionate
course.
as hell about it?
I was a kid and I was working with grown-ups. Like these were women in their 20s and 30s who actually were cheerleaders for a living. I was a dancer. I was a local dancer and I was hired to replace somebody very quickly. They needed a dancer who could learn all of their cheers in 2 days. And it was really fun. Like the outfits were cute. I had to get stronger arms because you had to run the length of the football field with your pom poms in the air. That was very tiring. You're dancing in high heels for an entire game. The whole thing was hilarious to me. I got my first bangs. Ivanka Trump had to make me spin and see if she liked the way my butt looked in the uniform. I mean, the whole thing was for me a fun, funny experience. But for these women, it was their livelihoods. I
Yeah,
mean, I got paid $35 a game. Um, but somehow it was their livelihoods and it was very important to them. And they started having them go to all these bars in their outfits with no protection to promote the league. And they were really feeling very, very unsafe and they were not taken seriously. And so that was how it all started. And
yeah,
I couldn't be treated that way because I was a minor, but I was the only minor on the team, so
yeah. Wow.
I was a part of this walkout, and yeah, it was great.
And then after high school, you went to NYU Tisch. but you didn't go to study classical theater or musical theater or anything conventional. You were studying experimental theater. That was a brave and unique choice, and that led to the identity of Lisa E. in the club scene in Manhattan, and that was you were bumping into Warhol and his people, and you were exposed as a very young woman to a world that was a whole lot different than your suburban childhood.
I couldn't have been more thrilled. That world was it's different from today. That world was a very artist driven community, very much a microcosm. You don't really have microcosms as much anymore. Certainly not multi generational ones. This was very multi generational. Most of my friends were much older than me, and it was exciting because there were so many people who were living their lives in ways that were unexpected or unacceptable to the outside world, and that is very grounding for somebody. That is when you see people expressing themselves and all those genuinely expressing themselves, living their lives in a way that is so different from what was acceptable. It's relaxing because there's no way there's anything wrong with you. You know what I mean? You're if the world has all these possibilities, then you belong in the world, no
Yeah.
matter what you are. And so as a young person, I was just desperate for that because I grew up in a very conservative suburban environment just outside of New York, but still very stifling. And I mean, there were so many kids in our high school that I didn't even know were gay, and they came out very late because they lived a whole life of repression in that town, and you could feel it, whether or not that was your issue. You could feel that there was a low ceiling of creative expression, and so I was thrilled to be around that. And then it's sort of the whole Lisa E aspect of it sort of became what's it called when you get a little pebble that rolls down the hill and just picks up mud, and then it just becomes this like huge unexpected experience, that I wasn't
In
prepared
today's world, it would
for.
be you went viral.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, but there was no real understanding of that, so, when the New York Times Maureen Dowd did this big article on me in the New York Times Magazine, and my phone number was listed in the phone book, and my address was listed in the phone book, so I suddenly had, 40 or 50 stalkers, and I was a kid. And I didn't know how to manage any of that. So it was very frightening, but it was great because I learned all about celebrity before I was, truly I had true value to the world. I was just famous for no reason, and it really shifted how I viewed my dreams and goals for the future. That celebrity status was not a goal, and that is something kids need to learn because they
Yeah.
see their favorite actors on TV or their whatever their influencer fans or whatever they are. But it's such a burden. The celebrity aspect of what we do is more of a burden than a bonus. You get free stuff sometimes, but you also lose control of your own reputation. You become public. What is private becomes public, et cetera, et cetera. So I learned that very young.
Yeah, interesting you told us the story, when we visited you at the house that House built, about being called up on stage at your temple and thinking that it was because of
It was our
some
anniversary.
yeah, it was your anniversary, but in fact, it was because of your celebrity that you had been
Yeah.
chosen and how in a way, you've been grappling with that since you were Lisa E.
Yes, I have. It's always been when we were on House, that was the beginning of Twitter. So the level, it was like since Twitter had just started, you were still in a period where you'd be chased by paparazzi because not everybody had a smartphone yet. So people with cameras could make a lot of money if they captured you going
Yeah,
in the pharmacy or in a parking lot or whatever it was. So there was a different kind of paranoia at that point that was then shifting into the whole Twitter thing where suddenly it was about millions of followers and everybody judging what you say or what you look at such a high speed. And I actually have never been comfortable with the social media aspect of it because of my early experiences with celebrity. I find being exposed to that many people very frightening.
One of the great accomplishments that came during that period that you were, that you were finding your identity and seeing all of this creativity around was that you created the first AIDS musical at the Cafe La Mama, which, by the way, when I was in high school in the '60s, I went to Cafe La Mama, and I met Ellen Stewart, and she was very kind to me and encouraging of my
Yeah, me too.
dreams of creativity.
Ellen was
Can you tell us
amazing. Ellen,
about Ellen and about the musical and about the impact that had? Again, it was such a you've done the first of a lot of things in your life, and
mm,
they've been chosen, which I think is wonderful.
the so here's the upside of celebrity. I think because I had gotten this celebrity for no particular reason, that experience made me really retreat from the club scene, from that whole world. I left school. I needed to sort of get my head together. And I ended up writing this musical about the AIDS crisis because what I was seeing was a lot of my friends dying very rapidly, and then friends that I knew from New Jersey thinking it was made up. They didn't believe that it was really happening. So I was living between these two worlds, and I was volunteering for Gay Men's Health Crisis, which was an organization that had uh, arranged for people to go visit people who were dying of AIDS in the hospital because a lot of times their families wouldn't go in. People were afraid to touch them. People didn't really understand how the disease was spread. So we had done 27 hours of this workshop to learn everything that was known at the time about the disease. And when people from the club scene that I knew discovered that I had taken this workshop, then people started pulling me into bathrooms to show me things on their body, to ask me if they were dying, things in their mouth. I mean, it was like there was so much terror happening. And so that was, and I had been studying experimental theater. I've been studying with Elizabeth Swados. I'd been studying like all this like sort of make it yourself, ground up, do it how you want to do it, storytelling. And I pitched my idea to Ellen at La Mama. And I think what helped was that she knew, at least for a workshop weekend, I would have an audience because people were curious about what I would actually do with the attention I was getting. And then through that workshop weekend, I earned the full production, which was a year later. They matched all the funds that I raised. I raised funds by singing and dancing in people's living room. It was a very from the ground up production, and it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you create something out of nothing but your instinct and storytelling skills, it's again doing it for the doing, with
Yeah.
no it wasn't gonna enhance you in any economic way or any
So
no.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I was very broke after that.
yeah, I'm sure. Um, recently I came to you with this play that Lisa Friedman has written, and so we're so excited that you're excited about it, and you've had so many, interesting ideas already. I think it resonated for you because you have a real sense of your Jewish identity and a real active faith. Where does that come from? How has that impacted your storytelling life? What part of your journey does faith play?
Well, I grew up in a very religious, not religious, not like Orthodox household, but much more so than my neighbors. We were kosher. We went to synagogue every week. So I think there's a certain structure that I grew up with that is maybe different from a lot of people. It requires, Judaism doesn't necessarily require a belief system, but it requires a practice of questioning and looking at things, always measuring the sort of this ethical scale of things. It's very thoughtful more than it is faith driven, I think. And for me in my life, I'm much more. I love ritual. I love the ritual that came with growing up that way, and I try to make a home that way. That's filled with like a way of marking time. We do Shabbat dinners, not because we are obligated to, but because it's such a beautiful way of reminding us and the whole family to reconnect and to take the time that we've earned to be present with each other. I love ritual because I feel like it ties me to the ancestors that I may or may not have known and maybe even my descendants. Like it's sort of a beautiful way of flattening time. And all those things are just sort of part of my zeros and ones. And in terms of like how they've influenced my career, I never changed my name. I never felt like I could move forward in life without my name. Even though I never really cared for my name until I met a German girl who was like, "Oh, Lisa Edelstein, what a beautiful name!" Because it means precious stone. So it's actually a very fancy name if you speak German, but it's in America it is not. In America, it sort of pegged me as a thing, a Jewish person, and that came with feelings from other people of what they thought that meant. And a lot of times that wasn't an attractive thing to be seen as. So it was something to overcome, but also something I couldn't walk away from. And
Right.
in the end, it just made a lot of my characters Jewish by default.
Yeah.
I've-
Yeah, I
Not because
noticed.
I made them that way.
Yeah. Yeah, there were some characters that you played that had not Jewish names, but, it seemed
Yeah.
like you intentionally asked perhaps to have the
Nope,
character
they made them Jewish.
they
Abby McCarthy is, like, on Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. By episode 2, they were trying to explain why my name was McCarthy and I was Jewish, but it wasn't my doing. It was the creators' doing. They wanted to incorporate that part of myself into the show, but it was never a demand from me.
but we did cast you in the live episode of ER. You played the director of the documentary that was
Yes.
being made that was that and I think that must be where you first met Tommy Schlamme.
No, I met Tommy Schlamme on a sitcom that I had a recurring character on with Nancy Travis, and he directed me in a few episodes there, and then ER, and then, Tommy cast me in I
Sports
was
Night.
a replacement on Sports Night, last minute replacement of somebody who had gotten fired on Sports Night, and that's how I ended up on West Wing.
Right.
Yeah, so
Well,
it's, like, all relationship building.
yeah, I had a little something to do with your ending up on West Wing.
Yes.
I'm proud to say because when I saw your performance in the pilot of The West Wing, that was when I knew we had something because you were playing a woman that had never been on television before, a law student who was also using some of her more readily visible assets to make money, and she was sympathetic. I thought you were fantastic in The West Wing,
Thank
and I bet a lot of people saw you and put you in their files.
Well, I do think that that role is a big part of how I got House, because Bryan Singer was obsessed with West Wing. And so I walked into my audition for House with an advantage that I wasn't aware of, which is the fact that he was obsessed with that character. So all these things add up in a wonderful way.
Yeah, and after that, House happened, and as I said earlier, you invited Talisa and I to the house that House built, and, it's an extraordinary space. I only saw the kitchen and the dining room, I guess, and the view, but I know I have a little house in Burbank that I own, and, I sit out on my back porch almost every day for hours. And, it's an amazing feeling, and it gives me confidence to do for the doing, and it gives me peace, which I
Yeah.
think your house must do that as well.
It's very hard to leave my house because I love it so
Mm.
much. And
Yeah.
now we have 2 studios, 2 art studios on the property. It's a compound. I never wanna leave it.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
being here, and it is true, it is a really powerful feeling to know that you worked for this in a really impossible field,
yeah.
and you created this beautiful space, and you
Yeah.
get to share it with family, and it's a wonderful feeling.
And then it nurtures your creativity. Your creativity created it, and now it
Mhm.
augmenting your creativity. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
I was interested to learn that, and I've experienced this a lot. After 7 years on House, playing a role that was unique for women to have authority and also, intelligence and standards and all of that. They said to you, "We'd like you to come back for the 8th year, but we don't want to pay you as much." And you said, "No, thank you."
Yeah. I mean, not pay me as much. It was a 75% discount. It was it was, uh, it was crazy. It was much longer story than that. There was a lot of really ugly behavior. It was one unhealthy person on the production end that was creating a lot of havoc for a lot of people. And it wasn't something I could really ever talk about because the financial crisis happened that year. And people were losing their homes. And even at a
Yeah,
75% discount, I was making great money. But like at some point when invested so much into something,
yeah.
it's better to just walk away if you're gonna be treated like that.
Yeah, and whether it's money or artistic freedom or
It was
whatever.
it was so much more than about money, but it was really ugly what had happened. It was
Yeah,
really ugly. It was like nowadays you could sue, but you couldn't back then.
yeah. So then you went on to write and direct for Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce, which was a whole other kind of creative endeavor and experience for you. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about and what it taught you about yourself as an artist?
Well, I'm that's the one and only time that I've ever met somebody outside of the industry and got a job that way. I met Marty Noxon at a kickball game with a bunch of people that my husband was friends with. And she told me about this project that she'd been working on and, that I'd be great for. And I put it out of my head because these things are said all the time in any party at any day at any time. So you just can't hold on to them. And about a year later, I saw her again and she said, I'm greenlit and I would love to come to you. Would this be something you're interested in? I said, absolutely. And then she that once the studio and the network get involved, it's not the showrunner's choice anymore. So then they offered it to like 10 women. I had to wait for 10 women to pass on this job that she told me she wanted me to do. And finally it came to me because they're always looking for somebody more famous who has more, visibility or whatever it is. It's always something. Anyway, it finally got to me and I was so excited. I was mostly excited because it was the first time I was going to be number one on the call sheet,
Yeah,
which meant that my behavior on set and my work ethic would have direct impact on the whole
yeah,
experience. And I'd never had that before. And I have been in very complicated shows with very complicated dynamics. And I wanted to make this like the greatest place to work on earth.
yeah,
And that's what I set out to do. And so we had this amazing crew that they would sing happy birthday whenever they thought a take was really beautiful. Like, it was a joyous and
yeah,
celebratory place to be, which is just everything I wanted.
exactly. And so interesting because I've worked on shows where the person who was number one on the call sheet was fabulous and set the tone and it changed the environment completely. It encouraged creativity and collaboration and all of that. And then I've worked on shows where number one on the call sheet was
Awful.
a disgusting human being who was only interested in themselves, and that impacted the creativity and all of it. And then you worked with one of my favorite actors in the world, Alan Arkin, I just as a young person, his performances in lots of important films were things I just thought, "Oh, please let me know people like that." I know he was reputed to be not the simplest and easiest guy in the world, but he always seemed to be a guy who had principles and values.
Yes, yes, he has principles, values, and a lot of talent, and,
Oh, yeah.
it was really fascinating to work with him, and working with him alongside Michael Douglas, 2 very different people. Michael Michael is like the warmest, menschiest, lovable guy who made it a point to make every single person on that set know that they were there because he was really excited to work with them.
Oh, wow.
And Alan, for him, it was like the first time he'd done a series, and Chuck is a sitcom writer, and I think that there was definitely a learning curve between the 2 of them and how to communicate with each other, and Alan simply would not do a sitcom. He was not interested in a sitcom, he would not do sitcom jokes. He was always gonna own the humor in the way his body produces it,
Yeah.
and it was hilarious to watch that sort of those 2 go nose to nose at times, but, I mean, it was an incredible learning experience. I had the best time. I mean, being in a fake car with Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin, like, in this tiny little
Yeah.
car, on a fake road with fake things going past the windows was, like,
Yeah, those are the
dream come
kinds of
true.
moments those are the kinds of moments where I always thought to myself, "Do they know who I am?
It's so
How did I
awesome.
get how did I get in this car with these people who are so fabulous?" You know, the last show that I wanna talk about, I think, is just, remarkable performance of yours in Little Bird as this Jewish mother who has an adopted daughter who she loves very much and who she discovers is a part of the Canadian horror story of Indigenous people who were uprooted from their culture and their heritage and for someone whose culture and heritage is so important to you, that I bet that resonated. It certainly jumped off the screen with authenticity and just moving emotionality.
Thank
It's some
you.
of the best work I've ever seen. I just watched it recently,
Wow.
and I've been privileged to have great actors 6 feet in front of me in my office for over 40 years, and I rarely think to myself, "That's a show I wish I had cast."
Mm.
You were extraordinary in it.
Thank you so much. That show is so beautiful. I love that show, and I loved playing that part. I was really honored to be invited to play that role, and for extended lengths of time, I was the only non-Indigenous person on set, and that was really beautiful. The showrunner, the executive producer of that show is half Indigenous. Her family on that side was victims of that particular, the residential schools, not the 60s scoop, but the residential schools, and on her other side, they were Holocaust survivors. So she really came to this honestly, and it was just a privilege to be a part of it.
It was
Huge
wonderful.
privilege.
I
Yeah.
among the things that I learned about you both at the house that House built and while we were doing research, is that you are an animal activist as well as a vegan. And I read a funny thing that you said that the hardest part about being a vegan is finding shoes without leather.
It's impossible. It's really awful. So I've sort of ended up getting used shoes because I have like so many pairs of vegan shoes, beautiful Stella McCartney shoes, and I can't wear them because they haven't really invented a fabric that quite works. Or if they do, they haven't done it in my size because I'm a half size and they just don't bother with the half sizes. Nobody needs to hear this about my feet, but but it's hard to get to. that particular that's the only thing that's left
Yeah.
that I have to
Um,
manage.
Lisa, I always end these interviews by playing a little game that my mom played with me when I was a little boy, and I'd be very grateful if you'd be kind enough to play it with us. She used to say to
Okay.
me, "Johnny, say 3 words that describe you." And of course, I was a moxie little boy. I used to say, "I'm Johnny, I'm me, and I'm a boy." What 3 words could you say that might describe Lisa?
Oh, I'm vigilant, I'm loving, and I'm creative.
Yeah, I think that's true. I thank you so much for joining us today. It was lovely.
Thank you, John. I'm so happy you asked.
Thank you.